Hello, I'm Janna and welcome back to the Crafty Corner. Today we're going to be creating with some Tim Holtz paper dolls. I'm going to be showing you a few different ways to alter these so that you can fit them into your spooky season making. If you'd like to see exactly which supplies we're going to be using, go ahead and pause here. All right, let's head over to the Crafty Corner. Today, we're going to be having some fun with some of the Tim Holtz Halloween paper dolls. Now, we're going to be doing some alterations with these, and we're going to be looking at 4 different ways to alter paper dolls. Now, the first and the easiest one, in my opinion, is altering with distressed glaze. And we're going to be bringing in some lumberjack plaid to alter this paper doll. And of course, we're going to need a little bit of scrap paper on hand to catch the spillover. So, got my scrap paper ready, and we're also going to need the Distress Embossing pen. I'm using the brush tip pen. I find this one to be the easiest one to work with when altering paper dolls. So we're going to take our embossing pen and we're just going to run that over the paper doll. I just want to scribble the Distress Embossing ink on here pretty quickly to get great coverage so we can then add our glaze. Now for this doll, I just want to add glaze to the dress. That's the only part I'm interested in really altering at this moment. So we're going to work on that. Now, when working with embossing ink, it's always important to remember that if you tip your substrate at an angle, you'll be able to tell whether or not you have ink where you want it. If your substrate is nice and shiny, you've got ink. If there is no shine, then there isn't any ink and your glaze will not stick to uninked areas. So very, very important to always pick your piece up and double check that you've got ink where you want it. I like using the brush because it is easy to apply large areas of ink in a pretty short time. And I love having the fine tip brush at the end that allows me to get into some of the teeny tiny spaces. If you are feeling ambitious and wanted to even do calligraphy with this, that would be a possibility. Also, the set does come with a bullet tipped mini pen as well. The bullet tip is also great for writing and for getting into small areas, but my favorite by far has to be the brush tip. Okay. I think we're pretty good. And just for comparison, I am going to bring in the bullet tip. This is the bullet tip. Also useful, but not what I prefer when working with paper dolls. All right, so we're going to pick this up. We're going to tilt it. As we can see, we have got great coverage with our ink. Oh, I've got a spot right there, which is why we always double check. Okay. Looking over here, that's good. Oh, missed a little bit on her shoulder. Okay. And quick check over here on the main skirt. And that looks great. So we're just going to pull in our scrap paper, put the paper doll down, cap our pen, and sprinkle on the glaze. Now for this, I'm just going to dump, and we're going to put it right back into the jar for all the extra. As you can tell, that came out beautifully. We don't have any empty spots. We've got great coverage. So I'm just going to set that down for a moment, and we'll tip our extra glaze right back into the jar. There we go. Excellent. Now I'll just set that off to the side momentarily. Cap our glaze. And I'm going to put the volume down right now for a little bit while we emboss. This is always cool to see in real time. There we go. We have our paper doll all nice and embossed, but we're not done. The embossing is lots of fun, but I want to add just a little bit more because we can. Not embossing, we're pulling in some Distress Nightfall glitter. This was a limited run, but if you're like me, you've probably got 1 or 2, maybe 3 in your stash. And for Halloween paper dolls, this is one of my favorite things to add. So I've got that open, I'm just setting it off to the side, and now I'm going to go in with some collage medium. And we're going to pick a few spots on the paper doll to accent with that beautiful glitter. So what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of glitter around her neckline, I think. Right there, and maybe at her wrist. Then I want to add some on the ruffle. That'll look good. And some more at the bottom. Just running that glue along here. And I also want to add some onto the umbrella too, since that kind of runs all the way around. Let's just add that there and along here. There we go. So we've got plenty of glue. Just set the glue aside, we'll bring our paper back, and I will sprinkle on that beautiful Nightfall glitter. Okay, and there we go. Sprinkle. So now that we have a good glitter coverage, I'm just going to tap off the extra right onto our scrap piece of paper. Just a little bit of a tap, make sure that all those loose little flakes are gone, and let's take a look. So glittery good. Okay, there's still a little bit of glitter on there, so we're going to give it another tap. As you can see, lots of glitter came off. Another tap. A few more. Okay, looking good. I love the Nightfall glitter. That gives the perfect accent for this. Definitely worth using. So we have our extra glitter, and we can drop that right back into the container and just give that paper a nice little tap. Make sure that we get all that beautiful glitter back in the jar. Okay, so looking good, and we'll just give our desk a quick clear. Make sure that none of the glitter particles are sticking behind. Now let's move on to our next technique. This next technique, we're going to be taking a paper doll and some distress crayons. We have got 3 different crayons we're going to be using for this, and we'll be using the Ranger water brush to color things in. So we have got, for the paper doll, some dried marigold, shaded lilac, and some vintage photo. Off to the side, I'm going to scribble out some distress crayon, and I'm going to use the medium matte as my palette. Then I'll be able to pick up colors as needed with the Ranger Fine Detailer water brush. Now, with distress crayon, there are several ways that we could go about coloring. I prefer to just dip and go right onto the paper doll, but you could also add a thin layer of collage medium over the top before adding crayon. That can give you some extra grip, but I like to get kind of a watery and uneven look when I'm adding the crayon. Now, just double checking my brush, making sure that it's clean. I usually use the back of my hand to make sure that I don't have any residue from other projects on it. Now we can start coloring. So I'm going to start with the dried marigold, and I'm just going to go lightly and kind of tap. I'm not really brushing. I found that if you do long brush strokes, then the color can end up a bit more streaky. So I like to kind of tap and let the color puddle just a little bit. Now the color looks really intense here, but as it dries, it's going to give a lovely tint to the paper doll. But you won't notice the change until everything has had a chance to dry off. Okay. Not bad. I'm liking how this is starting out. Next, I've got a little bit of vintage photo for her hair. Just dabbing that on right now. Already, the tinting is making quite the difference. Next, we're going to add some color to the rabbit. I wanted to do a brown bunny instead of a white rabbit, something a little bit different since we're kind of in the fall season. So I want him to be just a little bit darker, so we're going to add a second layer, and I'm also going to be going in with more of the dried marigold on the girl's arms and legs. So we're just going to keep carefully dabbing and slowly adding color. There we go. And the tint is looking so good. I am lightening up her face just a tad. It did kind of settle pretty heavily. There we go. That is looking much, much better. Okay, now let's see here. Back to that adorable bunny rabbit. A little bit more vintage photo. I'm kind of going for an almost chocolate looking bunny. But he'll be a nice fluffy brown bunny this time. Okay, not bad. Bunny's looking good. Need to fill in a little bit more dried marigold for her legs, and then we'll be able to move on to some shaded lilac. Now, as you can see, when I did the longer brush strokes, the color started to bead up. That has to do with the slick surface of the paper dolls. Now, again, I prefer to kind of put down a water layer and then I'll dab on the color. The really cool thing that I found, at least doing this way, is the more color I dab on, it kind of gives a really splotchy look. And I like the splotchiness, especially on fabric, because then it looks intentional, like there's kind of some movement in the fabric. And shaded lilac is kind of one of the lighter colors, so I'll probably need to do more than one layer. But again, I'm just going to kind of dab and tap while we're adding all that beautiful color in. Okay. And that is looking pretty good. I do need to dry that off to get the true look. And here it is, all nice and dry. And you can see the colors have shifted just a little bit. The dress looks like we've got some lovely ruffles going on. And that bunny rabbit is just too darn cute. So this is altering a paper doll with some of the distress crayons. And we used shaded lilac and vintage photo and some dried marigold. Definitely very pleased with the result. Now, let's move on to another coloring method. Here we're going to take these adorable little characters and they're dressed up as circus clowns. I love these outfits. It's so darn cute. Now we're going to be coloring with some distress watercolor pencils. We've got some Tattered Rose, Villainous Potion, and some Chipped Sapphire. I decided that I wanted to go with jewel tones with these guys, and I'm thinking that those stars on their outfits would look super cool if we added some stickles after the fact. But first, we're going to color. Now, with the distress watercolor pencils, there are several ways we could go about coloring. I have saved all of the shavings that have come off the pencils as I've sharpened them and collected them in the distress palette. Now, this is a great way to apply color. The only problem is I don't have all of my colors in the palette yet. I'm actually missing Villainous Potion in there. So instead of using the palette this time, we're going to be coloring directly from the watercolor pencils. Hopefully, before the end of the year, I will have the rest of the colors in a second palette. So then it will be much easier to access. Right now, we're just going to take the watercolor pencil and the water brush, and I'm going to directly lift the pigment from the pencil itself. And this is going to get me pigment right on the brush. Another way that we could apply color would be to dip the watercolor pencil into a droplet of water and then color directly onto the paper doll. However, if I do that, the pigment is going to come and lay down very, very thick, and that would not be the look I'm going for. I'm going for a light tinting. So I'm going to just use the watercolor brush and lift the pigment from the pencil itself, and then dab it onto the paper doll. So as you can see, pigment payout is really good. Just doing some light taps with a brush, and we're getting plenty of color right away. I love having all of these different coloring options, and the pencils in particular I find are fantastic for traveling and crafting on the go. It is your watercolor palette and pencil all in one. So for creative convenience, those would be my go-to if I were crafting on the go. Okay, next, let's take care of the little guy's outfit. First, I'm kind of thinking that for him, we're going to be doing some villainous potion. So again, we're just going to dab some color off the pencil and start painting that in. So we'll just continue tapping that right onto the costume. And as you can see, the color is laying down so vibrantly. I just love how concentrated the watercolor pencils are. And that villainous potion is the perfect color for Halloween. So there we go. Just lightly tapping that on. I'm just going over everything on the outfit except the ruffle because we're going to come back later and add some stickles. So the main thing right now is to just get that beautiful color down onto the characters. Purple is totally my favorite color for Halloween. Okay, and a little bit more around the edges. That's looking very good. And we'll just add a little bit more to the hat. Next, we're going to be going over to the other character and we're going to be pulling in some of the chipped sapphire distress watercolor pencil. Definitely going for jewel tones tonight. It seemed like those would be nice complementary colors. All right. Got that blue and we'll start dabbing this on as well. Again, chipped sapphire, that's got to be my favorite color in all of the blues. It's a nice, rich, deep blue, which I absolutely love. Okay, I seriously can't wait to put the stickles on here. That is going to have such a lovely contrast over the deep colors that we've added. And there's the last little bit of coloring on his hat. Perfect. So I'm going to give that a quick dry and we'll be right back with some stickles. For stickles, we're going to be using Stardust, and this is from Ranger. I love stickles. They're a not so messy way to add glitter, and they come in so many different colors. So we're just going to be dabbing the stickles on here and there wherever we see kind of the star pattern on their outfits, just to add a bit of interest, and why not, let's even add some glitter to those ruffles. There we go. A little bit of added shine. Okay, finishing up on this side, dabbing that on. Now, drying time for the stickles is going to be roughly 15-ish minutes, especially since here in Quebec, kind of humid. So best estimate, 15 minutes. Warmer climate, shorter time. More humid, longer time. All right, loving the sparkle. All right, now we're moving on to our final technique. And this one I've been playing with for quite a while. This is where we do a full-blown makeover of a paper doll. And I love doing paper folding and altering of collage paper. But before we even get into that, we need to work with our substrate just a little bit. First things first, we are going to take some scissors and we're going to carefully cut out and around each of this paper doll's arms because we're going to need space to add more layers to her. We're going to be creating a custom dress, and to assemble the dress, we need to be able to access all the different sections of the paper doll, particularly around the waistline and the upper torso, because the dress is going to be built in several parts. We're going to kind of build a top bodice of the dress with sleeves, and we're also going to be working at creating a fully pleated skirt. So the arms need to come up so that we can slip the quasi fabric into different areas. So for the collage paper, I'm pulling in some of the Tim Holtz Idea-ology plain collage paper. This has been discontinued, but if you're like me, you probably stocked up. And this is great for altering. We're going to be giving our witch a classic black dress. So first things first, we need to cut our collage paper and then turn it black. And to do that, we are going to need some black soot. what I'm doing first is measuring out just a little bit of the collage paper so that I know I'll have enough for the skirt, the sleeves, and the bodice. I'm doing a rough estimation using the paper doll as a rough measurement. So I'm just going to cut that off and start the coloring process. All right. So we've got our paper. I'm just going to move that so we're a bit more centered. And we'll just zip the camera back a bit. Perfect. And now I need to spritz and spray with the Distress sprayer. We're spraying the paper down because we're going to be blasting it with a black soot. Now, I'm not holding back. This is going to be a full dye job, so we're going pretty heavy-handed with the spray. But that's because we want every last bit of the collage paper to come out a beautiful black. And black soot is just right. Then we will be going in with some spider webs. This is Life of the Party CMS 380. Once our paper is dry, we're going to be using those beautiful spider webs to emboss some gorgeous silvery webs onto the dress. Now, this is my favorite part. You can take plain collage paper and then you get to customize it in any way that you want. You get to choose your color. You could add stamping. You could add stenciling. And in this case, I'm adding some stamping with webs. Let's kick things off with a bit of fast forward as I emboss some silvery webs and dry our collage paper. Here is the finished embossing. Check out those silvery webs. Those are looking pretty awesome. Now it is time to start cutting. The first part that we're going to be working on is the full skirt. And I'm going to be cutting just a little bit below the natural hemline of the paper doll. And I'm going to need 2 sections, one for each side. I like to do fan folds and get some ruffles all gathered up that I can then glue in place to form the skirt. So we're just going to take our paper and we're going to be working at a very quick fan fold. So this is just going to be an under, over, rinse and repeat type of fold. And we should be able to do that pretty quickly. The collage paper is nice and thin, so the fold won't get too chunky as we're working it over and under. So once that part is all done, we'll be able to start the assembly process because the first part has to be the skirt. Once the skirt is down, then we can use the bodice and the sleeves to cover up any of our awkward gluing and some of the cut edges of the ruffle. So it's all about sequence in this to create a full finished look. There we go. We've already got our first side complete, and that's just going to tuck under her arm. And as you can see, that is a nice full piece of skirt. That actually might be a little bit too big, so I think I might need to cut that down just a hair to make everything fit. So let's see, I think we'll chop about that much off, just pull in the scissors, and I can save this part for the top of the dress, and we can glue the other half to the bottom portion. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and fold our other side. So again, fan fold, under and over until everything is neatly folded up. I can't wait to see how the webs look once the dress starts to kind of fall into place naturally. I suspect that the ruffles are going to display the webs quite nicely. And the silver and the black is just the perfect contrast. It makes everything pop so much more. Okay. So I'm also going to be cutting a little piece of plain collage paper because I just had a thought. I want to make an underskirt as well for the paper doll using just the white piece of paper. And this will add a little bit more in terms of layers. So what I'm going to do is we're folding that little chunk in half. I'd guess that this is roughly 4 inches by maybe 3.5. And I'm doing a small little triangle fold. And that's going to fit right at the front of the paper doll. And that's going to add a little bit more interest to the skirt. And we're going to take a dab of collage medium and we're going to glue that down. So just like that. And just hold that for a moment. There we go. So that's going to become the front part of the dress. I'll need to do a little bit of trimming and I'll use the snips for that. But right now, I think we're going to get the sides of the dress put in next. We've got our beautiful ruffles and we're going to need some more glue. Now, the nice thing is because we cut the hands the way that we did on the paper doll, we'll be able to use them to camouflage some of those messy glue spots that we're going to be getting as I smush the paper to be held in place. But the main things that we want to see are the ruffles, and that will be completely visible using the hands and the other parts of the dress as camouflage. Okay, let's take care of the other side. I'm just going to measure that out. There we go. Now I'm taking that top portion of the bundle and I'm pinching it and then using the collage medium to stick it down. And as you can see, that forms a gorgeous skirt for the paper doll. And better yet, we'll be able to adjust that even more as she dries. Next, I'm kind of thinking that I want to fold the extra piece of white paper into another triangle. I did some small rectangles first and then kind of bunch this up into a small piece that I'm going to try to use as part of the corset area of her dress. I'm hoping that maybe a little bit of that white is going to poke through when I add the other black pieces that are going to form the bodice of the dress, just to kind of continue the idea of the white underskirting. But we're going to have to just kind of play with this and see how things fall out. We're just trying this at the moment. So let's stick that right there. And now we can try building in the other layers of the dress. And for that, I'm going to need 2 sleeves and the main portion of the bodice. So I'm just taking the scraps and mostly I'm just cutting small pieces and then I'm using some glue and then I'm just wrapping those extra pieces around the paper doll. I'm not really thinking about cutting specific shapes because I can tuck most of the extra paper out of the way and just hide it behind the paper doll, which is never going to be seen once I stick this to a project. So this isn't nearly as picky as, say, the skirt. I've taken a small piece of paper and I've also done a mini fan fold. This is going to become the bodice of the dress. We're pinching the bottom part just like I did on the skirts, and then I'm trimming the top down because right now it's way too tall. And with that, we'll add some glue and then we'll be able to stick that onto the paper doll. And after, we can use the sleeves to create the finished look. So with that little mini folded fan, just kind of placing that down, and I'm trying to get some of that white to peek through. If not, it's not going to be the end of the world, but it was a thought that maybe I could get that to show as well. All right, and we've got those beautiful folds adding some more texture to the dress that we're building. Now, let's go ahead and take more of that scrap piece of paper, and we're going to be wrapping that around her arms. And I'm hoping to kind of finish this off with like full sleeves. I really love the look of bell sleeves, especially on witches, especially like in fantasy novels. Like the big full sleeves look really cool. So just doing a little bit of trimming of the paper. And honestly, I'm eyeballing everything here. It's just kind of place it and then shape it as you're wrapping the piece of paper around the arms, because the arms are going to give you a lot of the structure that you're going to need. So I've got glue there. I folded my piece of paper in half. I'm adding a little bit of extra width. That gives us the sleeve. And now I can just trim off the extra with my scissors. So that's the bottom half of the sleeve. I'm going to need another small piece of paper that I'm going to tuck around the back of the paper doll for the rest of the upper sleeve. So just like that, add some more glue. And I can just tuck that extra bit around the back and you don't even notice that it's there. So you don't really need like a really firm plan for this. You just need to let the paper kind of take you on a little journey. All right, now the other sleeve. taking kind of a longer triangular piece, placing that down, and then I'll fold it over and hide the edges. There we go. Just folding a little bit and gluing. All right. She is starting to look witchy. Love it. Now that I have the dress completed, it's time to add a few finishing details. I definitely want to give her a belt. It's going to help hide some of those overlapping lines of the paper, and a belt's going to help give some camouflage to that. So I decided to use some washi tape. We're just going to take about a 2.5-inch segment. I'll lift up her arms and tuck that around her middle. And then I can just move the extra pieces of tape around back to hold everything in place. And there we go. We've now got a belt on our witch. That is good. Now, I think we'll need to give the skirt just a little trim. It's a little long in places, but now that I've given everything a chance to dry, it'll be a lot easier to trim without worrying about dislocating everything else that we've already placed on here. So I'm just kind of floofing the skirt out to get a better feel of how much extra space I have and how much I need to trim. Again, the cobwebs, they look so good in silver. It's just, small things like that. And embossing in particular for me really adds a small touch of magic to a project. So now, giving her shoulders a little bit more definition, I'm just chopping pieces off to reshape the paper doll. Okay, there we are. That is looking really good. I'm very happy with the way the skirt came out. The spider webs look good. All right, so clear the desk just a little bit and take a moment to admire her. Very cool. But she's not a witch yet. She needs a hat, and we need to pull one from this year's 2024 Halloween Idea-ology sticker book. There are some fantastic witchy hats in here, and she needs a hat. Now, here's the cool thing about the hats this year. 1, they're stickers, but 2, if you look very carefully, you're going to see that there's a die-cut slit in the hat so that now the paper dolls actually wear the hats. You slip a little piece of their head under the slit, and magically, she is wearing a hat. And that is just too cool. Small things like that really help the creative process, and I'm unbelievably excited that the stickers now have that little slit so we can put the hats on the characters' heads. That is just fantastic. And now we have our final witch. Let's take a look at all of the other things that we have been working on. The first paper doll that we altered was with some distressed glaze and a dash of nightfall glitter. She is shiny and ready for a magical night. And that glaze was some lumberjack plaid. Then we had fun coloring with distressed crayons. We used a combination of shaded lilac, vintage photo, and dried marigold. Then we played around with some distressed watercolor pencils to create these two cute little clowns and added some stickles for some added sparkle. So many fun techniques to play with. Glaze, crayons, watercolor pencils, and then we did a full transformation with collage paper and some embossing and lots of gluing and cutting. I love all of our characters. So fun to make the alterations and have a good play with a variety of materials. Thank you so much for joining me here today at the Crafty Corner for some Halloween fun with the Tim Holtz Idea-ology paper dolls. Until next time, happy crafting!